Good afternoon, everyone. This is the Audit and Finance Subcommittee of the Sweetwater Union High School District. I'm calling the meeting to order. It's 4:04 p.m. Good evening, everyone. We'll go through and as I call your name, you can introduce yourself, and then we'll get started with our agendized items. My name is Paula Hall. I'm a school board member. I'm the vice president of the school board and the chair of this Audit and Finance Subcommittee. Nicholas Segura.
Hi, Nick Segura, board member of the Sweetwater Union High School District. Hello, everybody.
Dan Gutkowski.
Community member, third term, and proudly serving.
Thank you. Lisa Schmidt.
Hi, good afternoon. My apologies, I'm a little under the weather, but I'm also a community representative.
Awesome. Thank you. Dr. Sawkill.
Trustee Hall, we have quite a few parties joining us today. So would you like to go through the district staff first and then
I'll just call people by name and they can introduce themselves. All right. Go ahead and Dr. Aguirre.
Hi, everybody. I'm Moises Aguirre, superintendent here at Sweetwater.
Okay, Dr. Sawkill.
Jenny Salkiel, Chief Financial Officer.
Thank you. Carolina Zimmerman.
Senior Executive Assistant to the CFO and support staff here for this committee.
Thank you. Athena Quarles.
Hello, everyone. Athena Quarles, Debt Finance Manager.
Thank you. Susan Park.
Good evening, Susan Park, Chief Compliance Officer for Sweetwater Union High School District.
Thank you. Vanessa Garcia, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. This is Vanessa Garcia. I'm the payroll manager for the Sweetwater Union High School District.
Thank you very much for being here. Jason Brust.
Hello, I'm Jason Brust, Director of Planning and Construction for Sweetwater Union High School District.
Thank you. Janaea Quirk.
Good afternoon, Janaea Quirk, Assistant Superintendent, Facilities and Operations.
Thank you for being here.
Yeah.
Natalie Cruz.
Hi, I'm Natalie Cruz. I'm teacher and special assignment here at the Compliance Office at Sweetwater Union High School District.
Thank you very much for being here. Anna Maria Alvarez.
Good evening, Anna Maria Alvarez, Assistant Superintendent for Teaching and Learning.
Thank you. Sonia Picos.
Hi, good afternoon. Sonia Picos, Director of Student Support Services with Sweetwater.
Thank you. Griselda Delgado.
Hi, good afternoon. Griselda Delgado, Director of State and Federal Programs for Sweetwater Union High School District.
Thank you for being here. Claudia Peterson. Perhaps that was just a name appearing here.
Claudia, you're muted. I'm here. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Claudia Peterson, Senior Administrative Assistant, Fiscal Services with Sweetwater School District.
Thank you for being here. Daphne Enriquez.
Hi, good evening. Daphne Enriquez, Internal Audits Manager.
Thank you. Gerardo Moreno.
Gerardo Moreno, Internal Auditor.
Thank you. Is that Donald Prince? Did I pass that? Is that the name? I'm trying to look at the names
correct.
here.
I'm Don Prince, Sweetwater Union High School District Purchasing Manager. Thank you.
Thank you for being here. Elizabeth Reyes Velasquez.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Liz Reyes, and I am Director of Fiscal Services.
Thank you. Sonia Picos. Did I already call? I didn't call on you
Yes.
yet.
Yes, I did. I introduced myself. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Sorry for the repeat, but it's always nice to see you. Let me see, who else did I miss? Janaea Quirk.
Hi, everybody. Thank you.
So you're the,
Oh, I'm sorry, Assistant Superintendent, Facilities and Operations.
thank you very much. So I already called on Natalie Cruz, correct? Is that all the staff on the call? Have I called all the staff members on the call? Then I'll go to,
I believe we're missing Griselda, correct?
no, I already
Griselda
called
Delgado.
Griselda.
Oh, you did? Okay.
I think it's Deanne, I think is probably.
Deanne Vecito.
Right. I didn't know if she was on the call. A lot of times she doesn't stay on the call. So Deanne, are you there?
I'm here, Deanne Macedo, Clerk of the Board.
Okay, thank you for being here, Deanne.
And then Omar introduced himself early on too.
Correct. And now we'll go to the Crow representatives from Crow. We have Kevin Smith.
Hi, Kevin Smith, partner. Apologize, I am somewhere between a hotel and the airport, but I'm going to defer to Elizabeth right now.
All right. Thank you for listening in. Elizabeth Sav.
I'm Elizabeth Sav, and a senior manager with Crow, overseeing the financial district audit. And then I'll introduce Charles, who's not here with us right now. He had another audit committee meeting that ended up going very late, and so he might be delayed. But Charles Reibley is the senior manager with Crow who oversees the Prop O bond audit.
All right, Charles Reibley. Okay, so that's everyone on the call, correct?
And we have Tori.
Oh, Tori, that's right.
Hi,
I saw her
yes.
name at the very first and then it
Yeah.
dropped. So,
Hi,
yes,
everyone. I'm Tori Jockle, Audit Senior Staff with Crow.
thank you so much for being here. All right, we'll get started with our first item on the agenda, which is the Crow audit for our regular annual audit, external audit. Oh, go ahead.
Excuse me, Trustee
Wait,
Hall, I
wait.
believe
Yeah, public comment.
we
I
do not
just got.
have public comment this evening.
All right, no one submitted public comment. That's good. Thank you for reminding me. All right, so now we'll go to item C, the audits. Dr. Sockhild, I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you, Trustee Hall. So good evening, everyone. We have our external auditors here from Crow, as mentioned, Kevin Smith, who's en route to it right now. So we'll have Elizabeth Sav go through the district-wide financials as well as the Proposition O financial and the Proposition O performance audits. As we've provided prior updates to the committee last in October, where we were at with our fiscal year end work with the prior fiscal year. We've now completed that. They will provide their report to the committee today and then to our board on Monday. And so I will hand over to Elizabeth to go over the details of what is included in the drafts right now.
Thank you.
Thank you. Should I share my screen, or Carolina, were you going to share? Or anybody have a preference?
Whatever works best for you, Elizabeth.
Okay, I'll share my screen for the district audit. If you have the bond audit, since I don't oversee that, I would love you to help me.
Of course,
okay.
I will be more than happy to.
I'll start with the district audit. Let me see here. I feel like it's always best to have a visual when you are talking about a 104-page report. So, all right. So we conduct a few different audits. And so the one I'm going to talk about first is the district's financial statement audit. In conjunction with that, and here's the financial statement intro page. In conjunction with that, we also do a state compliance audit and a federal compliance audit. So that's what I'm in charge of overseeing. We'll look at the Prop O bond performance and financial audit in a moment. And then I also wanted to highlight the SFP bond audits. Those are a different type of audit that's not connected with these financial statements or the Prop O, those are state facility program grant bond funds that have a different timeline. So we are not presenting reports on those to you all today. That is testing that we are undergoing currently, and those due dates for those reports are triggered by when the district submits their reports to them. So those are not going to be discussed today as they're not completed. They will be due to be completed in January and July of next year. So,
Hey, Paula, I am somewhere stuck between the airport and the hotel, and Elizabeth is already starting off very well.
All right.
But she can also bury the good news below the fold. Everything Elizabeth is about to present is great news.
Awesome.
Unmodified opinion. She can talk about what we have disclosed as weaknesses in the past and where we're going to present those before or present them this year, as well as going concern analysis, where we have presented that in the past and that has gone away. So I just, Elizabeth has gone into very factoid. This has been an incredible audit. Sweetwater has done incredible things under your existing management, and I don't want that to be lost. So with that, I'm going to give it back to Elizabeth, but she is going into kind of prepared script, but incredible audit, incredible results. You guys are where we hoped you would be. So with that being said, I'll go back to Elizabeth.
thank you, Kevin.
Thank you, Kevin, we really appreciate your emphasis on providing us that response. So thank you. Really appreciate it. I know our team and our board will be very appreciative of it. Go ahead, Elizabeth.
Sure. So I will highlight what Kevin was just mentioning. So the pages 4, 5, and 6 here are the financial statement audit opinion. And so, like he mentioned, we did issue an unmodified opinion over the governmental activities, each major fund, and the aggregate remaining fund information of Sweetwater as of June 30th. And that's an unmodified opinion. That's the highest level of assurance you can receive at the result of an audit. So exactly what you would like to see as a community member or board member. The following paragraphs go into how we conduct the audit. It explains that your management is responsible for approximately 96 pages of 104 of these pages. We are responsible for the opinions, but they take full responsibility for all of the numbers and disclosures. And then further down, we talk about our responsibilities and how we conduct our audits. And so forth. You will notice that there is a paragraph missing this year, and that is the emphasis of a matter going concern paragraph. And we just wanted to highlight the removal of that paragraph is due to a couple of reasons. Number one, a going concern paragraph is entered into financial statements when there's concern that a governmental entity will not be able to stay solvent and positive cash flow for a year from the date of the financial statements. So we're looking at June 2022, and so we would be looking up to June 23. Also, so you guys made some significant financial changes in your financial bottom line, and so that has impacted that removal of that paragraph significantly, as well as the fact that you've had access to the bond market, which occurred in September, October of this year. So that was another good tail sign that we're moving in the right direction for that. Any questions on that aspect of the financials? I do not intend on going through all 104 pages in case somebody was worried. But I am going to flip over to the nice summary page that we have here that just captures all of the summary of auditors' results. And so like I just showed you, we have an unmodified opinion for the financial statements. We had no material weaknesses identified. That's the most severe level of deficiency. We did have 2 significant deficiencies identified, but these are consistent with what you saw in prior year and are very much tied to the true course financial system. And so we are hopeful that as the district moves towards their new implementation of their new system, that they'll be working with us to ensure that they are able to eliminate these deficiencies, hopefully in the future. We had no other new findings other than those 2 items that were repeat findings from the past couple of years due to those system challenges and limitations. For your federal awards, we do a federal compliance audit. I don't know why this little line is doing something funny, but I'll click over here. So the federal compliance, we issued an unmodified opinion. You can see there, again, highest level of assurance you can receive at the conclusion of an audit. We audited your special education cluster as well as your education stabilization fund programs, which are your ESSER funds or the GEAR funds or whatever you want to call them, ESF funds. They had all sorts of fun acronyms, but we looked at a culmination of those group of programs as well. Here it indicates you as an auditee qualified as low risk. This is a common question that we get from our boards and our committees, so I just wanted to mention here, it says that you are not qualified as a low risk auditee. And what this means, this doesn't mean that there's particular concern about the district. This is really driving through the uniform guidance implemented or asked of us to follow by the federal government. We have to look at a couple different factors to determine how much in your expenditures we have to test. So if you are considered a low risk auditee, we are only required to get at least 20% coverage of your expenditures. If you are considered a high risk auditee or not low risk, we have to get at least 40% coverage of your expenditures. So that's all this is saying. The reason that you are indicated as not low risk is because of the going concern paragraphs that you had in your opinions in the last 2 years. So assuming there's no other significant changes with material weaknesses or going concerns in the next year, you can see this shifting over to the yes column. But again, all it means is we end up having to test more if you are considered not low risk. So we had no findings as a result of our work here in covering over 40%. Lastly is your state awards or state compliance audit. And this is identified as a qualified opinion. And I do want to talk a little bit about that because it's been a few years since Sweetwater's had a qualified opinion. So if you don't mind, I'm going to just scroll. Close your eyes if it makes you dizzy. I'm sorry, I didn't have it bookmarked. But here is the state compliance opinion. And this state compliance opinion lists out all of the procedures and requirements that the audit guide that is put out by the state of California each year. These are all of the areas that we are required to look at if they apply to the district. So you can see here next to attendance, yes, that applies to the district. So yes, we'll perform procedures. For example, kindergarten continuance, you guys are a high school district, so you don't have kindergarten students. So no, that is not something we completed procedures around. So it's quite a lengthy list you can see, and quite a few of these apply to you all. The state of California does not allow for the concept of materiality when it comes to these procedures. So if we identify an error that even if it has no financial impact, or even if it can be easily fixed by just resubmitting a report, it does not matter. We have to automatically qualify the opinion. And that looks like this down here, where we've described where the findings are that have qualified the opinion. And it actually is quite a successful feat if you are able to get an unmodified opinion on state compliance, because it is very particular. Here you can see that in our opinion, except for the non-compliance described below here, the district complied in all material respects with the compliance requirements referred to above. So I just wanted to draw that to your attention so you can kind of understand where the qualification is coming from. And it's related to these two findings, findings 3 and 4 further down. So we can scroll back down there just to give you some background information on that. We'll come back up to these. So here's the state awards section for the deficiencies noted. So there were two. There was one about the after before school program at Mar Vista Middle School. There were 2 dates that we selected for testing that the documentation didn't match up what was in the attendance system, which seemed to be a clerical error, really. So we've put out the effect of the finding was basically the overstatement of 2 pupils. The audit guide does not require us to go and calculate a fiscal impact related to this. So this is basically the nature of the finding. And then below here, management has had the opportunity to provide their corrective action plan. We have not audited these plans, these responses, but they are here for you to read through as well. And then the second finding that qualified that opinion was related to unduplicated local control funding formula pupil counts. A big mouthful. And what this requirement does is, as you may know, your LCFF revenue has a few different factors associated with how it's calculated. If you have a certain percentage or a higher percentage of population of students who qualify for free or reduced meal programs, that impacts a certain revenue calculation rate. And if you have a higher percentage of that kind of population, they try and allow for you to receive more funding based off of those percentages. And so one of the tests they've asked us to do as auditors is to select a sample of students who were reported as free or reduced, and then tie in to the supporting documentation to make sure that those students were actually directly certified with the county, or that they have a monthly income and certification form on file that shows that they qualified for that. As a result, there were 2 students at just one school site that were noted to be improperly included as free and reduced. When we looked at the supporting documentation, with the amount of monthly income for those 2 students versus the number of people who lived in the household did not meet the requirements for them to be qualified as free or reduced. And so they technically should have been coded as paid. What that means is we have to then extrapolate that finding across the population of that site. So that's why you see this 67. We only noted 2 actual errors, but the audit guide requires us to extrapolate it over the whole population here. The good news there is that because the district handles these, the culmination of all of the forms at each individual site, it's not a super centralized system. It's more decentralized, if you will. We were able to just keep the extrapolation to Southwest High School only. Because as you can imagine, if you have a centralized system, the extrapolation of these can become very, very large. And we would be basically looking at it across all 15,000 here versus the 800 here. So they can become very expensive findings. So in our mind, fortunately, I mean, no finding is great, but the dollar impact here is much lower than it could have been. And then again, you can see the district's response to the finding down here as far as how they're going to avoid it in the future. All right, I will pause there and see if there's any questions that I can answer related to this document, if there's anything that you guys wanted clarification on.
Excuse me, I needed to make some notes.
Okay, no problem.
Yeah, I think you answered the question I had, which was why the number 67 on that form on page 84. But I appreciate, now I understand. I still am looking to find where you talked about where it's a qualified opinion, because I didn't really see it in the pages you were looking at or showing on the screen.
Oh, okay.
So what page is that on?
Let's see, that would be page, if it's printed, it's page 81. And if it's on the PDF, it's page 87. And so it's the state compliance opinion where we list out the items, and then on to page 82, right in the middle, there's a paragraph that is qualifying the opinion. And then below it here, it's indicating that based off of these two findings, that's why the opinion has been qualified for the ACES program and unduplicated pupil count.
Okay, so that's where I wasn't sure, because it's kind of talks about the basis of qualified opinion, but I didn't really see where it's a qualified opinion. That's why I was wondering.
That's an interesting comment, Paula, because, or Trustee Hall, because we've actually had a new auditing standard that came out requiring us to reword all of our opinions. So these are going to look different than they did last year. And they were trying to make it more reader friendly or more understandable for the reader. And I feel like I don't feel like it's any better.
No, it's kind of around and not really pinpointing it. So that's where I was confused.
Yes, it's a
but
little confusing.
I appreciate that. Is there any questions from the committee?
I don't have any questions, but I thank you for all that information. And I mean, there's a lot of good news in there. And the two findings that you did find, I was glad to read the remedy of those going forward. And I'm very satisfied. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Schmidt, did you have any questions?
No, likewise. Thank you for the thorough explanation. My question was on getting low risk. Going over the findings and in a way that was easy for me to follow, and was very encouraging. Thank you.
Were you going to go through more on this audit? Because it seems like, are we done with all of it already?
It depends on it. There's a lot there, so I can touch on a few of the numbers if you would like me to. There's some significant numbers that I would be happy to kind of highlight. And then I can't see my screen of you guys. I'm going to move you over here because I can't see people's faces when I'm presenting my screen.
No, I can't either.
So
I can see them. I see them along the top of my screen, but so I had a couple of questions in the report.
Yes.
And one was on page 29.
Okay.
Page 29, where it speaks of the receivables.
Okay.
Oh, let me get to that page. The receivables paragraph, which is the second to the last one on the page. The last sentence says the district has determined that no allowance for doubtful accounts was required as of June 30th. Do you agree with that opinion, with the district determination?
And that's pretty typical for our school districts, especially because the vast majority of what's sitting in these receivables is amounts due from the state, where they've said you're going to get X amount of dollars or you're going to get this amount for this program or whatnot. And so the district has set up a receivable and recognized revenue in accordance with what the state has told them. And so usually when you have an allowance for doubtful accounts, it's related to, there's a history of uncollectability, or there's a history of a credit issue with that person that you are expecting the receivable from. But because the majority of your funding is sitting with the state of California or with the federal government that has promised a certain amount, there really isn't a lot of concern around there being a material uncollectability issue.
Okay, so with other sources of revenue or for the district, you would consider them immaterial in the big picture of,
Overall,
and that's
for,
why they,
yeah.
yeah.
And you're looking at June 30th, you know, at a cutoff period, and the amount that's sitting in those receivable balances just really is not significant in comparison to what you're seeing from the state.
Right. So they would be recording a revenue and a receivable, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
For that revenue, for all the expenses that occurred up through the period ending June 30th. Mm-hmm. And that's what would determine anything that wasn't already received would be set up as a receivable. And so any of the local revenues or small resources that are not federal, state in nature are not material in the matter that they would be impacting this decision. Is that's basically what you agree with, right?
In a nutshell, yes.
Okay, so, and what would trigger a change in that would have to be something where the government would be in a situation where they couldn't pay or weren't expected to come. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, all right. Okay. And then on page 31, down where it says the refunds of employee contributions, it's under pensions. For this purpose, benefit payments, including refunds of employee contributions. So does that occur when an employee leaves the district? Like they're no longer employed by the district, and is that where the refunding of an employee contribution would come into play? I'm trying to understand that.
I'm trying to read here. For this purpose, benefit payments are recognized when due and payable in accordance with benefit terms. Refunds of employee contributions, I am not sure.
Maybe Dr. Sockel knows the answer to that.
It is.
Yes, it's at the state level. It's usually at the state when they're reviewing both either STRS or PERS. If they deem anything when they're doing the analysis with benefits, they would let us know if there's any refunds, not done at the local level. It's at the state level or through those pension systems, I should say.
Oh, okay. Okay, thank you for that. All right, and then
Trustee Hall,
go ahead.
Would you, maybe this is one of your questions, but I realize I didn't really go over the impact of GASB 87, so I can also do that if that would be helpful.
Please.
Okay. Would you like me to do that next?
Yes, please.
Okay, sure. All right, so down here, so GASB 87, for those of you who've been with us on our multiple meetings, this is a new accounting standard that was being implemented in the current year that we've been talking about for years, it seems like. It was supposed to be implemented a couple years ago, and then with COVID, GASB Statement 95 allowed to extend that reporting period later. So this is the year for GASB 87. And what this is relating to is how governmental entities evaluate leases and how they are reported on your financial statements. And so, you know, prior to GASB 87, we had what you called capital leases and what you called operating leases. And so typically operating leases were not classified or recorded on the financial statements, and capital leases were. And so essentially this statement got rid of both of those definitions and just redefined what leases meant. Basically any agreement that you have the right to certain assets, to use of certain assets, and then the liability that would then offset that. Or if you are a lessor where you're leasing property out to somebody, how you account for that lease receivable piece as well. So you guys had both. You had lessee positions where you were leasing property, mostly equipment, and then you had the other side of things where you were the lessor and you were leasing out the use of property to different organizations. So let me apologize for the scrolling. So for governmental accounting, it looked a couple different ways. For the lessor side, you had on your fund financials, you would have a lease receivable. And so you can see most of it is sitting in your Fund 40, your special reserve for capital outlay, where you're leasing out properties or spaces, I think, to churches or clubs or whatever organizations, and you're collecting that revenue in. And then there was a deferred inflow of resources that offsets that essentially. And so the impact to your bottom line is really minimal. You're still recognizing the revenue as you receive it, but this is just to allow you to highlight and see what kind of agreements the district is engaged in for leasing out properties or equipment. The less E side, where you're leasing property and equipment, it doesn't show up in your fund financials, so it's not something that you're going to see here other than the principal and interest payments that you make every month or every year. That will show up and continue to show up down here. Typically, you guys had always recognized it in this line item under contract services, and going forward, you're going to see it basically reclassified down to the principal retirement section. But I'm sorry for all the scrolling. I didn't bookmark things, but I'll show you what the capital asset side looks like, the lease asset.
Elizabeth,
Yes.
do you mind when you're showing us a page, if you name what page number that is?
Oh,
Because
sure. I'm sorry.
then if we're looking at our own documents, we can follow along, because it
Yes,
is
of
kind of hard to see on the screen.
Yeah, it is. Okay, so I'm on page 38 of the printed.
Okay.
So this is your capital asset footnote. And so you see this new column here that says restatement due to GASB 87 implementation. And so you're placing these assets that you have the right to use. So you're leasing it and then you have the right to use it. So here's the asset side. And then each year you're going to amortize over the life of that lease or over the useful life, depending on which one is shorter, to then get you to your lease asset net amount. And on the front of the financial statements, further up in the report, it's all part of capital assets. It's just a different type of capital asset. So this is the lease asset side. And then the other piece of it is going to be in your long-term liabilities down here. And this is super tiny because of the restatement. So I apologize. Oh, that's a little too big. Goodness gracious. Here we go. And this is page 43. So you can see this is your summary of all of your long-term debt for the district. It includes everything from your GO bonds, accrued interest, down to your early retirement incentives that were paid off this last year, net pension liability. So here in these two line items, oops, that's just funny. So here you see capital leases. This is what you had last year. And because the word capital doesn't exist anymore, that's going to be removed. And then you have lease liabilities is now going to replace that. So anything that qualifies under GASB 87 will now be reported in the lease liabilities column. Your district utilizes a software program and works with a company called DebtBook, which has allowed them to capture all of this information within one system. That's not Excel, which is great. It really helps out with all of the disclosures, with the tracking, with the journal entries. So this, it's just, it's funny because we put in all this time and effort. I bet Athena's nodding her head, but we put in a lot of time and effort to basically just to report, here's the line, here's the one line. But they do utilize a software program that has been very helpful in helping track the lease liability and then the related lease asset moving forward. So you can see your balance. It's really not that big of a balance here, 677,000 of equipment that you're currently leasing in comparison to the rest of the portfolio.
Dr. Sawkill, Paula, I would
Yes.
take a slightly different take than Elizabeth. Slightly. Everything she just said from an accounting standpoint, from an auditing standpoint, agreed. But at a certain point, you start questioning, so why did the GASB come up with this? What they tried to say is there are financing decisions that governments make, and we need to reflect those financing decisions on the balance sheet. Those financing decisions for Sweetwater have been immaterial. You could have been a local government, a school district, a municipality, a county, etc., could have had material standpoints for a right to use asset, and they financed it. And it could have been under an operating or a capital lease previously, but it was a, hey, this is a debt. Didn't happen here because it wasn't that way. So it feels like much ado about nothing. But part of it is was much ado about nothing because you guys haven't financed things that way. So I want to focus on, it's not that it was immaterial, it was immaterial to you because you weren't financing in that option. You were not issuing debt, issuing in obligations that gave you right to use, etc., but created long-term liabilities under the new guidance. That didn't occur. So I would agree with everything Elizabeth said. I just don't want it feel like it was the GASB just doing what they were doing. There could have been a significant liability that did not exist here.
Thank you. So it's a way for us to recognize some of those impacts and what they would do, whereas previously we wouldn't have had that knowledge through this tool, correct?
Correct. In previous years, people could have viewed operating leases, you could have entered into long-term or short-term liabilities and just not short-term liabilities and not recognize the liability. Was the GASB's way of saying, right to use asset, there's an asset, but there's a liability. And you guys implemented it well, had software to identify, to calculate, etc. But there was no long-term liabilities that your constituents should be aware of.
Well, that's good. Thank you, Kevin. Right. Back, Dan, you have your hand raised.
Yes, just one quick question. I understand the lease liabilities. Can you give us some examples of the lease assets and what they would be?
Yeah, it's the counterbalance of the liability. So you have the liability. Let's say that you're leasing, let's say copiers, just for keep it simple. So the district is leasing copiers, and so you have this lease payable that you've got to pay out. But you have the right to use these copiers, which is your asset. So it's the offset to that liability. The lease asset would be the copiers, and then the lease liability would be the liability that you need to pay under that agreement, under that contract down. And so they will basically the liability will be paid down at the same rate, essentially, that the asset will be amortized down on your books.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
Yes, yeah.
So can I ask you what the threshold of value is for the lease? If it's an item like a copier or say an iPad or something like that, technology of some sort. Would that be considered, I mean, those are leases, but maybe I don't know if they're beyond.
Yeah, there's definitely the opportunity to introduce like a capitalization policy type idea, but for the lease. I don't know if Athena, I can't see who's on, but I don't know if Athena's on. I know that she's the one that has been handling and knows the policy like the back of her hand.
Oh, yes, she's on.
Okay.
In here, so they're all copier leases that you're looking here at GASB 87. We do not have a threshold currently for our lease liabilities. When we enter our leases into our software debt books, we go through a series of questions which tags it whether it's GASB compliant or not. So as we go through those series of questions, if that liability triggers to be a GASB lease, we enter it in our system. Those that are non-GASB leases, we still track those. They just don't report up to this level.
Okay, thank you.
And Trustee Hall, most of them are copier leases. As for the iPads, those were paid off the prior year. So
Right.
we don't have any of the technology leases at this point. But at least we
Right.
now have the infrastructure
Right.
in place through that system to now allow us going forward, as Kevin and Elizabeth mentioned, how we can account for that.
Thank you. Yes, I realize we don't have currently the leases for iPads, but who knows what the future holds, correct? Okay, thank you for that. And I'll hand it back over to Elizabeth.
Yeah, I think the other thing that
Hey,
since we're
Paula.
on this, oh, go ahead.
Wait.
Go ahead, Kevin.
Follow one quick comment to what you just asked. So the way the GASB was written, as well as subsequent guidance, and how your management team adopted it. So it's not focused on the asset side or the right to use. It is really focused on the liability. And they would argue, people in New Jersey, that no single AP account is material probably, but material, you add them all up, it could be. So it's not we're going to establish a $5,000 asset value, and that's the liability we look at. They have looked at every liability and determined whether or not we book from that point forward. So it's really kind of a ground up from a liability versus ground or a top down from an asset, and it's just not material. So this is conservative how they've implemented as well as standard.
Good. Okay, thank you, Kevin. I'll hand it. All right, Elizabeth, were you going to go to another?
Yeah, I think that since we're on this schedule, one other thing that we've been talking with our committees and boards about is the fact that you have a significant decrease in your net pension liabilities here. So the net pension liability, you can see as of last year was almost 500 million. And then this year it's dropped in half, essentially to 239 million. And the net pension liability, as a reminder, this is your CalSTRS pension liabilities and your CalPERS pension liabilities. The process is where CalSTRS and CalPERS undergo their own audits and actuarial analysis. And then there's a schedule of proportionate shares that basically each district within, or for CalPERS, each governmental employer within that plan is provided their proportionate share percentage, and then this is then calculated for each individual organization. So for Sweetwater, this is the combination of your CalPERS and your CalSTRS. This 260 million drop in your net pension liability is not cash in the bank. It is just simply a reduction in the liability at the valuation point in time. So this is as of June 30th, 2021, really, because they look at the valuation 1 year in arrears. And so when you're looking at the liability, you say, okay, this is our total liability outstanding, and then this is how much we've funded. We're going to offset it by our investment assets that we have set aside to pay for this liability. And so this is why it's a net pension liability. You've offset it with those assets. A year ago, the market was very high. And so the investment valuation of those assets that offsets this liability was much higher. And so that's why you're seeing this huge swing in your liability going down. And this is not unique to Sweetwater. This is across the state, and probably I could argue across the country. But for CalPERS and CalSTRS, this is what's driving this huge drop. So don't get too excited, because that being said, we all know what the market looks like now. So next year, be prepared for this to swing much further back the other direction. So I just wanted to emphasize that for you all because it is a huge number in reduction, and it can definitely skew things when you're trying to look at the government wide. Again, this doesn't show up in your fund financials. It doesn't show up in your first and second interim reporting or your budget. This is purely on the government wide financial statements. But just to try and expand on that, did I explain that well enough? Or are there questions?
Well, I do have a question, and I don't know if anybody else on the committee would have a question, but if you do, I can't see you, so you'll have to unmute. But I was wondering, does this have to do with how the governor and legislature contributed to the STRS and PERS? The last couple of years, they made significant contributions to those funds. I don't think they made it this year, but they did it.
Paula, to a certain extent, it does.
Okay.
From the impact of the assets. They have made significant contributions. That impacts the assets. What Elizabeth was trying to refer to is the lot. This is where it's so weird. So the liability is what it is, and it's an estimate. It is what our teachers, what our administrators have done, are estimated when they will retire, etc. It's an actuarial estimate.
Okay.
Now, from a funding standpoint, historically, the actuaries have always said we should smooth actuarial gains and losses. The GASB divorced that, and they said we should be able to come up with a asset or liability as of an X date. And that's where Elizabeth is saying, as of June 30th, 2001, the market was good. June 30th, 2002, not as much. So for everything that you're seeing as a reversal of almost a negative expense could turn into a greater expense next year. Now the actuaries will smooth it out, and they will deem what an appropriate contribution, etc. But this is a pure. This is what the actuaries say the liability is. This is what the assets are as of June 30th, and that will go up and down based upon each fiscal year end. It could vary significantly between 5/31 and 6/30, but it is truly as of June 30th, 2001. This was the assets.
All right, thank you for that. I appreciate it. Okay, let's move on then. Go ahead, Elizabeth.
So those are the primary things I wanted to highlight. So if there's any other questions that you have, Paula, I'm happy to answer or go to any other pages that you want to look at.
Okay. I don't want to take up too much of everyone's time, but I did have a couple of questions. One was on page 93 with the ACES. And let me find the page where it says the views of responsible officials and planned corrective action. So this would be the response from our management team at Sweetwater, I believe, correct?
Yes.
All right, and where it says in the last sentence, it's talking about, well, this is a response to the finding on the before and after school programs. So one of the things the district is, of course, addressing the internal processes and training, et cetera, to make sure there's multiple checks and balances. But the last sentence says, additionally, the district will continue to visit sites on a weekly basis and observe attendance process and procedures to ensure all staff understands and follows them to minimize human errors. My question to Dr. Sacco and Dr. Aguirre is, who is that district person? How is that going to look on the district? who is responsible and how is that going to, who is going to go out to these site visits? And how are you putting this in administrative regulations, and are there any board policies that need to be adopted to address any of the findings in this audit report that are not already, that haven't already been submitted and adopted by the board?
I think Dr. Alvarez had to sign off, but we do have Ms. Delgado on. So they do have a practice, and she can provide a little bit of context, that they do have a coordinator that does go out and visit the schools on a daily basis. And so they, with this finding, with additional context, will be further emphasizing that with the work that they do with the coordinators at each of the schools with these programs. I think it's part of their process, but I would defer, I think, to Ms. Delgado on some of those specifics on the day-to-day.
Hi, Trustee Hall. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi.
Yes.
So thank you for the question. And you know, we do have a very tight process as to making sure that our district TOSA goes out on a daily basis to various sites to ensure that they offer support to the coordinators and also South Bay Community Service staff that supports the coordinator at every site. So how we do the checks and balances at every site is imperative as to how we report to the county our attendance on a monthly basis. So those processes we will continue to evolve to make sure that we ourselves, Leila Kashani and myself, go out there on a weekly basis to all the sites and specifically check for these processes. So the human error component that happened in these two instances, we caught those, by the way, because they were very simple and easy to catch because of our process. So if we hadn't had the processes in place to reconciliate the form that they do at the school site on a daily basis and the form that we do on a monthly basis, those type of errors wouldn't have been caught. But we can always have room for growth, and we can offer schedules to the superintendent and to Dr. Alvarez to ensure that we are getting out there to offer one-on-one support to our coordinators.
Thank you for your response, Ms. Delgado. My concern is that this was caught by auditors. It's not. This is a finding by the audit team who found that there were things missing. And if your TOSA has been going out there already, and I mean, that's the process that you've already got in place. What my question is, how is this normalized in administrative regulations and board policy to make sure that it is structure that we're recognizing in our standard operations, but also to ensure that we're, because obviously this is, there were challenges, right? 2021, 2020, we had COVID, we had shutdowns, we had people out, not just students out for illness, we had people, staff members out for illness. And I have to think about that as having some impact in this particular case. However, as a board member, I want to ensure that we're not just, it's not just one certain piece and not one prong approach, and that the board is really adopting policies, and the superintendent is ensuring there are administrative regulations in place, and that staff is reviewing those and really utilizing those, that every team member at every level understands where to look for those administrative and guidelines so that they are able to do the work properly. And we have those expectations. So I think it's a little different from it's not that you're not doing the right things already. It's how do we ensure that we really support it and define it properly. And so I'll let Dr. Aguirre, you want to respond?
Yeah, thank you, Trustee Hall. Let me see if I can figure out how to lower my hand. So there's multiple layers to this. To the question of how do we ensure that this is, in this instance, it was observed by the audit team. First and foremost, the state and federal team does trainings to staff. So we want to be you want to be able to do this in a way that you avoid any potential for lack of clarity or confusion. So I think training is really critical, particularly staff kind of turns over. The training is really important. And then the work of the TOSA, but there's also other mechanisms through which this can be, this can come to our attention. Regardless of how it comes to our attention, we have a duty to investigate and follow up. So I do believe we have robust mechanisms, but as you expressed, Trustee Hall, in this instance, it was through the external audit process, which is one of the mechanisms, but there's other mechanisms as well. And through which, again, as soon as we become aware or informed, we follow up and perform our due diligence to make sure we're doing that. But I think ultimately what's most effective is really the training piece to make sure that all of our staff understands the expectation and the procedural expectations as well. I think that really is critical more than anything is the training. And then as incidents come to our attention, to make sure that there's that understanding that we will follow up and perform our due diligence in every instance. So we can definitely have a conversation around some, whether we can revise existing administrative regulation or policy. So we can have that conversation, but I also didn't want us to go away without that understanding that there's multiple layers, including training, including different entry points. But I'll ask the team to review what our existing policies, administrative regulations currently say, and see if we need to revise those.
Thank you. Ultimately, the principal also has to be aware and almost do some auditing of their own on different levels for different reasons, not just of the ACES program, it seems, but a lot of the operational side of every school in the district as well, correct? I mean, that's ultimately who has to be the responsible person for all the operations at the school. So
Yeah,
I appreciate
definitely.
the work being done and the collaboration and the fact that you do have some structures in place that have been going on for a long time, these are challenges times that we came out of a lot of shutdown and pandemic related challenges. So I take that all into consideration when reviewing this. But when I look at some of the things in here, the findings, like the one on payroll, the ACES one, we've had issues in the past on ACES years ago. I mean, when I believe when we first started as a board, when we were elected that first year, there were some issues with, the counting of children in that program. So it just flags to me that we need to make sure we're always revisiting these things and tightening the structures to ensure we do have those checks and balances. Thank you. All right. I don't have any more questions. I was looking at some of the balance sheet and the fund statements and comparing it to our unaudited actual SACS report, and I found some variances in that. And it's my understanding that there's some differences in how, what was it? The depreciation. Dr. Sawkill, the question I had sent earlier was why the figures didn't match to that first page of the SACS report, and you responded with a good explanation, and maybe Elizabeth can expound on it a little bit. Do you want to remind me? I don't have it in front of me, what the email.
Correct. Well, as Trustee Hall, as Elizabeth mentioned earlier, like the net pension liability is one of them because we don't have that on the SACS report. It's one of these government-wide entries. The other one is also depreciation. SACS, we don't depreciate our assets like you would in a typical organization. That's kind of the statutory code under SACS. However, when we convert those to generally accepted accounting principles and those government-wide financials, that's the work with Crow, what we call the conversion entries, that they then go ahead, and it's one of the pages, I think it's page 22 or 23 of the audit report, that goes through those specific line items. So that's why you will not be able to tie it, right, from what we had at SACS back, or the SACS report in September to now this financial. But that's the work we work with Elizabeth on those specifics. Also some debt entries and things like that.
Thank you for that.
I can expand on that a little bit if you want me to.
Yes.
So there's this, here's your fund financials, right? So this is kind of your income statement. This is what you're used to seeing a little bit in a little bit cleaner format, all combined. But when you're looking at your second interim or unaudited actuals, general fund would be your Form 1, Form 21, etc. Down here is your fund balances. So if you're trying to tie this out to what's in your unaudited actuals, this won't tie out, but there's a schedule, and hopefully in the futures it will tie out as we've been cleaning things up. And I know your management team has been working hard on making sure they're pinpointing all of the different entries that are needed, despite their challenging true course system. There is a schedule in the audited financial statements. Let me see if I can just guess where it might be. Oh, it's close. Look at that. Okay. On page 77, if there are any changes to the ending fund balances as what is presented in your unaudited actuals, there is always a schedule that's required back here, reconciliation of an audited actual financial report with audited financials. So it'll show you the entries that we made or that management made in order to get what's being reported to you. So if you looked at your unaudited actuals, the ending fund balance would be this amount. And then there was a small restatement entry made related to your GASB 87 implementation. So we give you a description as to why, and then this is what shows up on the financial statements here. So this is the fund financial reconciliation page.
Okay.
Is now joining.
And then the other piece of it is that Dr. Stockhold was talking about these pages here on pages 22 and 23. These are all the activities that help you get to the full accrual, page 16, statement of net position. So taking all of your fund activities, putting all of the long-term assets, long-term liabilities onto the books, and here's the ending result.
Okay, I'm trying to find a page I was looking at.
I'm sorry.
I was trying to find the page I was looking at because I went through and I was comparing, and some of the numbers did match up, but there were several that didn't. I think some of that was in the interfund transfers and so yeah, I get it. I think I will go back and look through some of that and it'll probably help me understand a little more, but I was satisfied with the explanation, Doctor. I'm pretty satisfied that our team is doing the good work and nobody's trying to, alter numbers or, it is really good. I'm sorry that we're still on a system like True Course that is such a manual, it takes such amount of manual time and tracking and all that. I'm really looking forward to the district full transition to the N4 and the new HR and financial system. So I think that'll help everything out a lot better and smoother. But some of it is just how these numbers are looked at and where they're reported and why it may not be exact numbers, number to number correlation. So I appreciate your help in pointing out those additional pages where those numbers are explained in the adjustments. So thank you for that. Regarding the payroll, the finding in the audit report regarding payroll, are you satisfied that the district will be, well, you'll let us know next year, right? When you submit your next audit report, if there have been a significant improvement in that work. Because
and I can share with you, Trustee Hall, that we've undergone some group meetings already, actually particularly related to payroll, that Dr. Stockhold spearheaded to have us meet, not just with payroll, but with HR, kind of brainstorming how do we go about, not we, but how do we collectively as the district go about making sure our system is up to par, that it's addressing any segregation of duties issues, controls issues, making sure we have the right checks and balances, ensuring certain people don't have access to different modules, right? You don't want people who can create an employee having the ability to pay an employee. So all of those conversations have been going on, and they have incorporated us as necessary. But we're hopeful, as you know, they've been doing some heavy collaboration with Infor themselves, as well as internally with all the departments, trying to make sure that they're making it count.
It's a new day for Sweetwater when it
Yes.
comes to having a fully integrated system online, versus everybody out there doing their own little, and standardizing the operations. I would hope will really eliminate some of these gaps in control, because that is a concern to me. I mean, I remember asking about internal audit and some other things, probably back in 2015, asking about who goes out and looks at this time cards that the site's putting in. Right. Who is watching this? Who is looking at that? Because all these little pieces need to fit together properly. Yeah. So it's very important, and I'm really looking forward. I know the district will be in a whole different place once these systems are live and going.
Yeah, well, and as a reminder, during our audits with school districts, 90-something% of your expenditures are payroll. So from an audit perspective, that's a huge deal. And we typically, because payroll controls are usually very strong at districts because of that reason, we typically do a test of controls approach and then do some analytics and just make sure that we're comfortable with everything. But Sweetwater, because of the nature of the system, just so that you guys have some reassurance, we substantively test your payroll, which means we take your entire population and we sample employees, and we have team members who spend quite a bit of time with Vanessa and her team, God bless her, and go through all of the detail and all of the backup, just to make sure that we are able to give a confident, unmodified opinion.
Thank you very much for that. I appreciate it.
And I have a visitor, sorry.
Oh, no problem. Okay, so do you have anything else you want to share with us on this audit?
Oh, I think that covers my talking points.
Okay, does anybody else have a question from our team? No, we really appreciate your presentation and the work you've done and the significance of the audit. I was just wondering, is this the final audit report that you'll be presenting, or was this the draft? Because it didn't have the watermark. Okay.
Yeah, this is a draft, and you guys are a key part of this process. You are our primary responsibility. So we bring this to you in draft, so that if you have edits, comments, questions, we have the opportunity to talk through that and get your final approval. We still have a couple more steps to take, but we plan to have this finalized in the next few days so that it comes to the board in final form. But we don't anticipate any significant changes to the report at this time. Yeah.
Well, it's wonderful to know you have an unmodified opinion, and that we have, because I was wondering, when I didn't see any comment about, except in the introductory letter, about ongoing concern, but the fact that you and Kevin both emphasized it's dropped, that means it's no longer an issue. We have come out into a new day.
Yes.
And that's wonderful. I commend our team for all the work they've done these past few years to get us there. Thank you very much. So if that's all for this item, we'll go to the next item, which is the Propo bond finance and performance audit. So do you take that one on, or?
Well, Charles, I talked long enough that Charles was able to arrive. So, which is great because I'm not super connected with that audit as you guys have requested. So I'm like, I can cover the basics, but
right. No, yeah, Charles is here. I see him, and so is Janaea. So I'm going to hand it over to Charles and Janaea. Okay, go ahead.
Alrighty, so we'll cover brief discussion of the financial statement audit and the performance audit for Prop O. I'll share my screen here in just a second if I can get my tech going. Thank you for your flexibility on timing, I guess, Elizabeth. So we have, as you recall, likely we have 2 different scopes involved with the Proposition O audit. I'm going to talk about each of those 2 separately, and then we'll address any questions that you may have. We met previously with the Citizens Oversight Committee to discuss the draft results a few weeks ago. So they were made aware of that. We talked through some of the questions that they may have had in the process, but so it's just kind of a summary from a financial statement perspective. So there are, again, as I said, 2 scopes. So one is that we look at the financial statements of Prop O as a standalone entity, right? So pulling that out of the district financial statements and carving out only Prop O activity. Here, I wanted to go to this page. And that's really looking at the presentation of those financial statements and whether they are, do the items presented exist? Are they complete? Are they classified in the correct groupings, et cetera? And then the notes to the financial statements that give required disclosures along with those. And then the second scope is the performance audit. And so that's really looking at what you've spent from Prop O during a given fiscal year. In this case, the year ended June 30, 2022, of course. And we're saying to the public and to you all as those charged with governance as to whether those expenditures were compliant with Prop 39 and were they also compliant with the project lists that have been approved by the board. In addition to that, there are other, on the performance audit side, we've been asked to perform certain additional procedures. So I'll talk through high level what those were. Not to give too much of a spoiler alert, but we have given clean opinions or unmodified opinions over both the financial statement audit and the performance audit. So the page that you see before you, I hope it's not too small. I have kind of a wide screen here. This is the financial statement opinion. It's similar to the district audit as a whole. The opinions for all government financial statements were modified this year for a new auditing standard. So it's shifted things around. The intent was to provide clarity. And really what that meant is that our opinion is at the top of that first page. And so this gives this unmodified opinion that I mentioned is right here, right on the top of the first page. And so if you're looking for that, it's right there. And the other paragraphs that follow clarify things such as what auditing standards that we followed, clarifying that these bond financial statements are not representative of the entire district, and then also responsibilities for management in these financial statements and responsibilities for the auditor, really just clarifying what those are. And then I'll just point it to one number here for reference. This is the balance sheet, or again, that snapshot of in time of Prop O. So you've got your, in this case, I'll leave just this note here of the fund balance. So as of June 30th, 2022, your assets and other, your assets here with cash and other related assets, less your liabilities to, say, vendors, you had an ending fund balance of 18.7 million at June. And so you're kind of equivalent to your equity. And then throughout the fiscal year, your income statement, this is the next page, you've got approximately 18.8 million of expenditures that were made during the year. And so that 18.8 million of expenditures is comprised mainly of this line here, which you would expect, which is the 17.7 million capital outlay. So you'd expect that the majority of those expenditures are going directly to the construction of the assets that you've approved under Prop 39 and under your project list. And again, the pages that follow are the required notes to provide clarity on district accounting policies and other required disclosures. So the other deliverable and the other scope that we cover as far as Prop 39, Proposition O under Prop 39 includes, as listed out here, there's our opinion at the beginning of this document. And this is again under the performance audit as a standalone. We've given that unmodified opinion. And to support that opinion, we've provided the procedures that we performed under that. So just kind of quickly going through these, procedure 1 was compliance with applicable laws and regulations. So in this case, public contract code, looking to make sure those were followed on a sample of sites, on a sample of expenditures, and compliance with district policy for change orders. So looking at a sample of change orders that were entered into during the fiscal year. Again, no issues there. The big one, which is the meet from Prop 39 requirements, which is our bond expenditures and record keeping. So that's this procedure 3. So looking at a sample of expenditures, both payroll, non-payroll, and looking at the supporting documentation to make sure that those were compliant with the Prop 39 requirements and Prop O project lists. Again, no issues there. In addition to that, we also visited physically certain sites that were being constructed during this year. And so we had no issues in those procedures. Everything existed as we expected it would. I'll also highlight the next procedure, which is procedure 4, program management procedures. So having inquiries of management, examining other supporting documentation to make sure that those were followed. And then also communications from the CBOC to the taxpayer. So looking at whether the projects were continuing to be monitored and whether those communications were made on a regular basis. So we reviewed, had inquiries with management, but also reviewed these reports here with capital improvement program status, consolidated budget, current budget detail, monthly report, and so on. And then continuing on to procedure 5, we had special interest items. So looking to make sure that the budget had approved, the governing board had approved the budget and position control for the year. And then making sure that the CBOC met regularly. So no issues there as well. And then making sure that the other communications were made as expected during the year. So looking at those communications and also including warranty monitoring, making sure that those preventative maintenance processes were in place and occurring. And the last page of this report is really just a detail. This is the expenditures that we reviewed from a non-payroll nature. So looking at the sample that we actually looked at as part of our testing. Again, no issues to report from a compliance perspective, no issues to report from a financial reporting perspective. So we've given those unmodified or clean opinions. I think it still continues to demonstrate management's commitment to getting us what we need, the CBOC's commitment to their responsibilities, and we just appreciate everyone's efforts in that process to get us where we needed to go. I'm happy to dive into any specific questions on either report.
Thank you for your presentation, Charles. Are there any questions from the committee? No, it's pretty clean and straightforward. Charles, I really appreciate it. You mentioned, did I hear you say that the Bond Oversight Committee made some special requests for you to look into during this year's audit?
Not specific to this year. The minimum required level of testing, if you will, from Proposition 39, which is what Prop O was approved under, requires testing of the expenditures and reporting on those and their compliance. As you may recall, there's additional procedures annually that the district management team and the audit committee and the CBOC had requested to be done. So we've continued to perform those procedures annually. So no change in those for this specific fiscal year.
Okay, great. All right. Well, I really appreciate the fact that you have an unmodified opinion and that we continue to do the good work that, the district staff, not, and that our schools are getting the facilities needs addressed, even though it may not be as quick as we want, or as, you know, we don't have the billions and billions that we really need to do that, but they are doing the good work, and it is moving the district forward. So we thank you for your audit, and we thank Janaea and her team for their work. Thank you. Dr. Greery as well. So thank you. That's it. That's it for you, because the team didn't have any questions on your report. So we appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Okay, I'm getting a little wonky here. So thank you very much, and we'll move on. We thank the Crow team, and we appreciate them, and they're excused from, I'm sure they have wonderful things to do this evening.
Thank you all for having us.
Thank you for your.
We'll see you next week.
Okay.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye. All right, so now we'll go on to our next item, which is ongoing and completed external audits. Go ahead, Dr. Sokeld.
Thank you, Trustee Hall. So I think as Carolina pulls that up, we've got a couple of them that are still ongoing. I know that Ms. Delgado and Dr. Alves are addressing this too here. We've got our federal program monitoring review underway. We actually had started some interviews with the reviewers this week into next week. So hopefully by the next meeting in March, we'll have the conclusion of this audit and any feedback. So we'll be bringing that to this committee, but well underway with a lot of documents and a lot of information that we've provided. So that's the status on that one. The next one is regarding CalPERS. As we've previously shared, we've been working with the state or with PERS along with the County Office of Ed and also our HR department. Some data files regarding the sample that they selected with PERS specifically. We're going to be completing that this week. The intent is to have the information submitted by the county office by the December pay cycle in mid-December. And so they'll have that information. And then we've also been working with them along with our HR on any prospective changes regarding like longevity pay. And so that's already went into effect on the November pay cycle. So we're also kind of nearing, you know, the completion of the corrective actions that they're looking at. So hopefully by next month, we've been in contact. Vanessa Garcia and I meet with the PERS auditor monthly, kind of as, you know, since they released the report and kind of giving them updates as to where we're at. So we anticipate that probably by January, we'll have a conclusion to this one as well, because we've provided all the information that they've required. It just has to go through the County Office of Ed because they're the reporting entity that sends it over to PERS. So there's just extra steps, but we should have this one completed as well, hopefully within the next month or so. And then I think the next one on here, we provided on this report our last update to the board, which is what we provided a Friday update. And kind of as what you've heard with our external auditors, a lot of our remaining items to address this AB 139 is really centered around the new implementation of the computer system of the ERP system. And so we should have that within here within the next few months. So as we're working through that remaining implementation phase, so hopefully that'll address that item. And then this next one, this County of San Diego Health and Human Services. This one too has been concluded. So we have the letter there. It had a finding specifically around payroll signatures from both employees and supervisors. And I know Ms. Sonia Picos was on the call here as well. If there are any questions regarding that, so the work that she's been doing with stakeholders to ensure that corrective action is in place going forward. And then also, we have on here just as the reference to is what was just presented by Crow regarding the district financial and bond audits. And then also, as Elizabeth Sav highlighted, the school facility program audits, those are underway. So those are separate and apart from our statutory requirements. I think that's the last one, yes. And so that's where we're at with the district audits outside of the traditional financial audit.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the team?
Yes, just one.
Mr. Gachowski?
regarding the implementation of Infor, are you currently in the beta testing phase of it, or is that going to happen in early spring?
Yes, we've been spending quite a bit of time with them, both on the finance and HR side of things. So we've done what's called system integration testing, SIT testing. So that was already done last month. And we've gone through different iterations of that over the last year, but we just had that done in actually October and in November. And then we're getting ready in the month of January, it's user acceptance testing, UAT as they call it. So we're moving along with that next phase in the process. So no, and then we're talking about conversion data because we're going to have certain cutoff points when we start to migrate things over. So we're moving along rather quickly here over the next few months.
So March is still a realistic date for go live?
We're targeting that. I don't know, Dr. Geary, you want to highlight that is our target, everything that we're kind of centered around, but we do need some training components of it and working with a lot of stakeholders on the training. So then that would be the next piece that we need to focus on.
Yeah, so just to supplement that, after the initial round of testing, as you can imagine, the programming team goes around and does additional adjustments and modifications. And so we're going to test it again. The goal is to be able to have it in place by March, so we can do the training in the months of April and May for a full transition by June 30th, by the beginning of the new fiscal year. So our target date for actual go live is July 1. But the goal is really to have the platform ready by March, because we'll need to do a substantial amount of training both at central office and then at school sites. So because of the training component, I think that's where we'd rather extend the timeline to the end of the fiscal year so we can train staff appropriately. But in terms of the testing of the platform, it's ongoing, and those adjustments with the programming team are happening.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Geary and Dr. Sawkild. Are there any other questions regarding the presentation on the other external audits? So one of the notes for Trustee Segura is that this the one audit from the school's facilities fund, that won't be presented until next spring, like January, or the next meeting. If it's completed, you'll be following up on with the committee as they move forward on that one. And I did have a question around the county, the Health and Human Services, because again, it goes back to the timesheets and the payroll. You know, it is always payroll. It seems to pop up and get us. So I'm wondering if the internal auditor is going to be doing some significant audit. I would think that because this finding in our regular external audit, financial audit, that was a finding. It was a finding with the ACES program, and it's a finding here on the timesheets with the Health and Human Services. I would like to see that the internal auditor does some spot checking on these processes. And, you know, I thought they were doing some kind of audits with financial disbursements every time there was checks generated or whatever, but maybe since the county now has the fiscal accountability, that has changed. But I would ask if they could start doing, I know they had something that they did issue a report, that's in their internal auditor report that's coming up on our next item on the agenda. But I really think because of all these different issues around the payroll, the documentation, the signatures, all these different issues, that we really need to have the team, the internal auditor, do some checking on things throughout the year. I saw Daphne Enriquez had her hand raised. Do you want to speak, Doc? And Dr. Geary is shaking his head. So whoever wants to respond first, go ahead.
Sure, good evening. Okay, we do have on our work plan, which we're not sharing this evening, but we do have the audit of the ACES program that we check for eligibility and attendance and compliance. And we also have payroll on our work plan as well. So hopefully those are items that we'll be able to get to in the second semester.
Okay, well, my ask isn't like just a one-time audit. It's a periodic checking on things as you know, kind of spot auditing throughout the year, not just a one-time review. Is that possible?
Yes, our ACES audit actually is a routine annual audit that we have every year that we work with state and federal programs for. The payroll audit it typically isn't done annually. However, considering the audit results, the external audit results, which we do take into consideration, we can always reevaluate that and make it more of a focus annually.
And Trustee Hall, if Sonia Picos is on the call, I believe this has to do with the contract that we have with Health and Human Services. So Sonia, I don't know if you're on, and if you can kind of provide some context to this topic.
Yes, thank you. Good afternoon, good evening now. Yes, so this is a contract that we've had with the county, and this was, you know, for last year, and there were a couple of reasons that we've identified why we missed this. We are definitely on board. We have new program manager overseeing this program, and both staff and supervisors are well aware, and definitely we have all of our deadlines on track. So we don't foresee this being an issue. We saw this, definitely it was. So we have it on our timelines too, and myself to monitor with Dr. Estrella.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Yeah, and Trustee Hall, I think part of what we've identified, you know, given the fiscal challenges of the past, I think we've been under-resourced in some areas. And so we're just now getting kind of to a place where we can be sufficiently resourced to be able to really make sure that this doesn't repeat.
Thank you for that, both of you. I appreciate that. All right. So if there's no other questions from the team, I will. We can move on to the next item on our agenda, which is the internal audit item. Sorry. So, Dr. Sawkill, are you handing it off to Ms. Enriquez?
I think it's
all right.
These items, I think Daphne Enriquez will be able to address. Yes.
Great, and I want to inform the team that Daphne Enriquez has moved up. We reclassed, correct? The position was reclassed to management, so we now have a manager and 2 other auditors on the internal audit team. Is that correct?
Yeah, as of the last board meeting, Ms. Enriquez is now in a management capacity. That is correct. It really, I think, will allow for a more efficient management of the internal audit office. So looking forward to that. So
Great.
belated congratulations for this group to Ms. Enriquez.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, go ahead, Daphne.
Okay, this evening, the first internal audit item is the department's ongoing and completed document. There are a few audits we currently have in progress, such as for miscellaneous collections. Miscellaneous collections are a report of all income received at the school sites from miscellaneous sources, such as facility use or transcripts to be deposited at the district's finance department. We also have our annual audits of nutrition services, the unduplicated count, and the instructional minutes that are currently in progress. If we refer to the second section that begins on page 3, this is for our non-audit services that are procedures that our department performs that is agreed on with other members of management, such as reviewing the ASB monthly financial statements and the commercial warrants. And so this is all pretty much straightforward. The last section that begins on page 5 is the appendix listing all of the reports that have been issued in the current and prior fiscal year. Those that are highlighted in gray were presented in the prior meetings. The reports shared with the current agenda as part of this item are listed on page 8. These include a report regarding the arbiter pay system that is used to pay sports officials. There's a few reports regarding ASBs. There is a report for the attendance reporting. And in the pages that follows, we have copies of all of those reports that have been issued, as well as all the corrective action plans. Were there any questions about any of those reports or corrective actions?
Mr. Gutowski?
Yes, for the arbiter pay, what software that you end up having, what's the completion date for the policies and procedures that were noted as being deficient?
The arbiter pay report, let me see if I can get to that. So that begins on page 9. And in the pages that follow the report, there's actually a draft policies and procedures. I'm trying to find the page for that. So that begins, I'm trying to find it. That begins on page 25.
25 in the PDF document, what page is it?
Yes, so it is actually on page 25 of this agenda item.
Okay.
And that's what we're looking at now.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Trustee Hall, Vice President Hall?
Yes.
Yeah,
Go
so
ahead, Trustee Segura.
I just wanted to add, I know this one has always required some focus on behalf of everybody, and we've been doing our best to train, all those involved, and with the turnover of the students and all that. This is make sure before I open my mouth which one this is. Yeah, I just appreciate all the work that's going in and the focus and just what I read when I was reviewing this item. I know we have a lot going on, but I truly appreciate the effort in this.
Thank you, Mr. Segura, Trustee Segura. I appreciate it. And so is there policies that the board has adopted, Ms. Enriquez, in relation to Dan's question?
I'm not aware, there aren't any board implemented or proposed policies and procedures. It's, I think, intended just to be more of an informal process document for staff to follow or for training purposes.
Will it be online, or, one suggestion when you have training for a particular software or whatever, if you can do like a soft copy or a video of the training and have it posted on the district, the employees, where the employees can access it to view whenever there's changeover, because I think that might be help with some consistency. A lot of times, people personalize their desks, they do a lot of things that make it comfortable for them as how they track and organize it. But in some of these things across the district, we kind of need to really institutionalize it and make it a comprehensive manner that we do, operationally have these systems in place and that are followed by staff, not just, personalized. Yeah, I think that's one of the things one of the goals of administration is to normalize or to put systems in place so that if people change, the system isn't going to change. We're still going to operate. It'll still have good structure, checks and balances, etc. So I think that might help in some of the processes where you do experience a lot of turnover, like ASB. So, and we do have an extensive number of athletic coaches, etc. So it seems like we need to have something where they can access it. Sometimes you sit in a training and you get like a fire hose of information shot at you, and you just, you go away going, what did I just hear? And you think you're going to remember stuff, but you go back to your desk and you say, wait a minute, what did they tell me to do? So having some kind of tools like that might be helpful for keeping things on track. But I appreciate the work you've done and your team. Yeah.
And Trustee Hall, we can also work with for purposes of arbiter pay, we can work with Dr. Moore and his team to make sure that they're looking at the procedures, as you mentioned, to make sure it's institutionalized and there's a structure there. So right. I'll inquire further with Dr. Moore about this. And Daphne's been very good about following up with the person who oversees this platform to make sure we're working on it. I think part of the challenge is, my understanding, it's been recently instituted by CIF, and so making sure all the procedures are really clear as part of the process. So so we'll work with Dr. Moore in his area.
Great, thank you. And thank you. Yes, Mr. Gutowski, go ahead.
One follow-up question for the ASB. I know there's a lot of paperwork. Is there things that Sweetwater has looked into to automate this? Because I see a lot of the challenges is around documentation and other things that if there was some type of an internal control that the district had and could monitor, has the Sweetwater looked into anything for assisting with managing those ASB funds?
So thank you for that, Mr. Gutowski. I'll ask Dr. Sawkill if she's available. I know that recently there's been a platform implementation to support ASBs, but I'll ask Dr. Sawkill for more detail on that. Dr. Sawkill.
Thank you, Dr. Geary. Yes, this past year, actually the prior year, we had actually a pilot school. We started with the high school and the middle school, but this past year in 21-22, we brought it to scale for all of our schools because they were on different platforms in a lot of cases. So we wanted some uniformity and also to help provide support, where we would also have access in fiscal services or in finance and also an internal audit. We migrated the schools to a platform called ASB Works. And so we've been working with them from that reporting standpoint. There's been some trainings. We actually are starting both internal audit and finance meeting with each of our schools one-on-one to provide them training. I know you mentioned the documentation, just understanding some of the nuances of how they go about with students of asking for expenditures, because there are a lot of things that we do have to have documented. That the approvals are in place, that minutes are in place, some of those things. And so I think they're going through that process to see where we can streamline it and ensure that we have the appropriate items, because a lot of that's in accordance with FCMAT, the guidance that we get from that entity along around ASBs. So I think we're continuing to improve that. There are some areas that we've received feedback from school sites around credit card opportunities, using credit cards and things like that instead of having cash in some of the student activities. So we're looking at that, but we need to put some policies and procedures in place so we can manage that. So we continuously look at that where we can moving forward. But moving to a consolidated platform has helped us help support, but also another aspect of it with the auditors that they were just sharing, our external audit team, a new compliance requirement that went into effect 2 years ago, GASB 84. This functionality is also available in that platform. So I think it's taking those incremental steps and us continuing to look at where those opportunities are.
Thank you for staying ahead of the wave.
All right, thank you for that, Dr. Sawkill and Mr. Gutowski. Daphne, go ahead.
Sure. The second agenda topic is for associated student bodies. In August, we completed review of all financial statement packets for the last fiscal year. And we are sharing with you a summary of ASB activity and ending balances as of and for the year ended June 30th, 2022. For each site, the schedule has total revenues, total expenses, and the net of that activity, as well as the ending fund balance. It also provides for total assets, total liabilities, carryover amounts, and if the site has an excess balance to spend down. So if we take a look at Bonita Vista Middle as an example, which is in the upper left-hand corner, their total revenues for the year was $46,556. They had expenditures of $41,588, and they had an ending fund balance of $43,260. Pages 1, 2, and 3 of this item are for middle schools, high schools, as well as the alternative ed and adult schools, respectively. Page 3 also includes the aggregate totals. So those grand totals at the bottom has the total year-to-date revenues, expenditures, and ending fund balances.
Thank you. I think we were familiar with how this works, but if you want to tell us, are you hearing back from schools in a timely manner with their spend down plans, or have there been any glitches in this fiscal year that you're aware of that may present an issue for a school being able to do that? And what are we doing to help them with that?
We are hearing back from them timely, and in the next item, we will be sharing some of those spend down plans if we should move forward with that. So our next item to share in the second quarter, our focus was around those spend downs. And for our community members, for context with spend down, there are two concepts. The first is referred to as carryover, which is the amount of money the ASBs have at the end of the fiscal year. This is also referred to as ending fund balance, and that the ASBs are carrying over into the next fiscal year. And the ending fund balance as of June 30th will be the beginning fund balance for July. The district determines reasonable carryover balance, and if there is a difference between the ending fund balance and the reasonable carryover amount, the ASB is expected to develop a spend down plan for that difference. With this item, we are sharing with you a summary of spend down balances for the current year and the spend down activity for the prior year. On this schedule, the shading in gray is for the prior year and shading in blue is for this current year. For example, if we refer to Bonita Vista Middle, again, which is abbreviated as BVM, as of June 30th, 21, the site had an excess balance of $35,492, and during fiscal year 21-22, they spent approximately $9,000 or 26% of that based on their approved spend down plan. And as of 6/30/2022, the site had an ending fund balance of $43,260, and of that, $13,967 was determined to be the carryover. So the site submitted a spend down plan for the remaining difference of $29,293. At the end of August and early September, the Office of Internal Audit sent each of the school sites a memo communication regarding their year-end balances. Those considered to have excess funds, such as the example we just walked through with Bonita Vista Middle, was asked to submit a spend down plan. If we refer to the next agenda item, this is an example of one of these communications. Page 1 describes carryover and spend down as well as the purpose. And page 2 provides the methodology used to determine their excess balance, to spend down, and additional relevant guidance.
Thank you. We have several of those items in our agenda packet, I see.
Yep.
So are there any questions from the committee regarding the balances and spend down plans? Okay. So we can move to the next item if you don't mind, which is the fraud hotline.
Okay, the next item with the fraud hotline. This update is provided on a quarterly basis. For the quarter that ended September 30th, there was one fraud hotline submission that the case for was closed, as it was a request to be for a student to be removed from a contact list. It was non-fraud related. And at the quarter end, there was one case that remained open. That was a case that rolled forward from the prior year. On page 2 of this item is a summary. I think it's the previous item. It would be the fraud hotline quarterly report. This item is the fraud hotline award update that we were just looking at.
Trustee Hall, I believe you're on mute, so we can't really hear you.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, there it is.
Thank you. I was, yeah, the fraud hotline, that's it. Quarterly report.
And then after this item, if we can move on to the related one, the last item.
Well, let's wait a minute.
Okay.
Is there any questions from the committee on the fraud hotline report? Pretty straightforward. All right. Okay, now you can go to CTV.
Okay. All right, the last item is an update on the fraud hotline request for proposal or RFP. That information was first shared about in the July meeting. The reason for the RFP was because the district was in the 5th year of the contract and needed to re-solicit. So the RFP was an invitation to bidders. That was released on September 2nd. We received one response from the incumbent by September 27th, which was the due date for the proposals. A review committee evaluated the proposal on October 21st, and the board took action and awarded the contract on November 14th. The contract was awarded for this upcoming February 1st and January of 2025 with the option to extend for 2 additional one-year terms.
Thank you. Thank you, Daphne. We appreciate your help.
You're welcome.
Yeah. All right, so we'll go to the next item. We'll try to move through these last couple of items very quickly because I want to respect everyone's time. And really that we don't need to have votes on these. What we have is last month, if you recall, our last meeting, I pointed out the fact that we have sort of a disconnect between the election of the committee's chair with when the board actually appoints and has their organizational meeting, which is in December. They elect the people. That's when the board decides who will sit on the committee. So aligning the election of our chair to January makes more sense because it follows the first meeting that the committee will have following the board's organizational meeting in December. So whether that's January or February, whatever the time frame is, but it will be at that first meeting in the following calendar year where the chair will be elected. And we wanted to make sure and update this, our Audit and Finance Subcommittee calendar and charter to make, I don't think it's in the charter stated as an exact date, and I don't think we need to revisit the charter for that, but I think we do need to make sure that that we all agree to update the calendar for the election of the chair, which is on item C3A. And then in the, so does everyone agree with that change? Just nod your head. Hearing no objections, we'll make that change. Carolina, please note that. And then the Audit Finance Subcommittee, we just want to make sure that there's a statement in there, and I will to stagger the memberships of this committee members as well as the board members so that they're not over, we don't have all new people, as Mr. Gutowski had brought up at our last subcommittee meeting. So we need to update that language, and we'll ask Carolina to clarify that in our Audit and Finance Subcommittee charter, if that's necessary to do. Does everybody agree with that? I don't really have the capacity tonight to go through that word by word. Well, I think we have the professional team to be allowed to take care of that. So yeah, we all agree with that. Good. All right, so those 2 items. The last thing that we have is our
Trustee Hall, I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you, but did you want to add a meeting in January for the audit subcommittee? Because our next meeting is actually scheduled for March 6th to address the.
Well, no, I made the statement. It really talks about whenever the next meeting is.
Okay, okay, that's fine.
It's
I
up
just
to them
wanted to
whether
clarify that. Okay.
I'm not going to be on the subcommittee, so I won't have a voice. If the chair of next year's of the future subcommittee wishes to call a special or another meeting or an additional meeting earlier than March, they can do so and work with Dr. Sockfield and Dr. Aguirre to do that. All right.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for clarifying. I appreciate your allowing me that, but yeah. All right, so now we're on to the unadopted minutes. Did you all have time to look through the minutes? Was there any objection to the minutes as submitted?
Motion
No,
to
do I-
approve.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. No objection? Nope. All right, seeing no objection, we're ready to adopt the minutes. Thank you all so much. It's been an honor to sit on this committee with each and every one of you. I really appreciate you being able to volunteer and represent our community. Thank you all, and I wish you all success in list. And I know that you're going to be here when they finally get that system up and running, and next year you'll reap the rewards of really fantastic audits, I think. So
Oh,
yeah.
yes, Paula, if I could add something, you're not going to get away that fast. I want to thank you for, you're not going to go away like that. I really want to thank you for all the work you've done. You put your heart and soul, and not only to the board as a board member, but into this committee. And I know you've asked a lot of questions, and you know, in regards to supporting the, sorry about that. And supporting the staff, not only wanting things done, but making sure that the staff was supported and had the tools they needed to do that. And just your overall, just dedication to making, to getting us where we really are today, and that's in a good place. And I just want to thank you for all your years and years. And this is one of the most challenging committees there are in as a board member. It's very complex, and with your background, you came in running, and I just want to tell you, we truly appreciate all your work, and I'm sure some other people want to say some nice things as well, but thank you, Paula.
Thank you, Trustee Segura. I appreciate that. It was nice.
So I want to take that lead and thank you for your years that you ended up mentoring me through the various different Propo committee, and then also through the, through this subcommittee. And I just, I'm just in awe of the support that you've given to the community. I always say that the backbone of a community is how you educate it, because that's your future. And what you have done is you created a little ripple that'll go on for many years. And thank you, Paula, for your advocacy.
Oh, thank you for that, Mr. Gutowski. I really appreciate that. It means a lot.
It's all been said already. I don't want to be repetitive, but your service and leadership, and I've really learned from you, from not having as much knowledge as others and in this field, and I just want to thank you so much for your patience, really, and explaining it, and to those that have listened in from the public, it's due to your leadership. Like a lot of people have really understood this more, and it's been very important for the community. So thank you.
Well, thank you for that, Ms. Schmidt. I really appreciate everyone. If it wasn't for district leadership and the boots on the ground at every level, we wouldn't be where we are right now as a district. And I'm just grateful to the professionalism and the dedication of Sweetwater staff. They're phenomenal, and they do phenomenal things for our kids every day. And I'm grateful to each and every one.
And Trustee Hall, now that the committee's gone, I do want to be redundant. I really think we all as a team, we really are a team, and we all bring our strengths and our areas of focus and to really come together. And I think you have helped us be stronger because of the inquiry you lead in a very constructive manner, but yet holding us accountable as staff, but also as Trustee Segura mentioned, in a supportive way. And I think that's the way government should work. Trustees hold us as staff accountable, but in a way that helps move the mission of the district forward so that we can improve our practice. And I really appreciate everybody on this committee, but in this instance, Trustee Hall, I just wanted to express my gratitude for the ongoing work that we've done together, and really in helping us be in this place, which I consider to be a strong place. We are fiscally sound. We've addressed a lot of the audit issues, and we've done that together. And so I just wanted to express my gratitude for that. And I really appreciate the way Committee Member Gutowski mentioned it, is that the ripple effect. You never know how broad and how far that ripple goes. And so thank you for being that voice of constructive accountability, constructive partnership, so that we can work together to really better support our entire community. So thank you for that, Trustee Hall.
Well, thank you for everything. And I tell you what, this meeting today started off on a wonderful foot when Kevin Smith got on the call and said, incredible, it's an incredible audit report, and really gave kudos to the staff of this district and all the hard work they've done. And it's a clean slate, and I'm very thankful for that. And I know these findings will be addressed. I know you're already doing that. You probably already were working on it before that ever got the draft report. So I really appreciate everything. Dr. Sakel, Carolina, Dr. Aguirre, all of your staff. I know if I could reach out to every one of you, I would, but I think it's time for us to say this meeting is now adjourned. And I thank you all and have a wonderful holidays. Merry Christmas and all the other things that people practice this time of year. We hope you have just a lot of prosperous, wonderful get-togethers and enjoy. Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you.
Thank
Good night.
you. Good night.